and away to his castle, to be happy forever. I know someday when spring is here, we'll find a love anew, and the birds will sing and wedding bells ring. Someday, though he's far away, he'll find me someday, when my dreams someday my prince will come. Someday my prince will come. Someday my prince will come. Someday my prince will come.
If sparkling gems tickle your fancy, then I'm surprised you haven't played the game Jewel Jumble. And I thought you were fun.
Hi, I'm Don Hahn, the producer of Beauty and the Beast and The Lion King, and I'm here at Disney's Animation Research Library, where researchers from all over the world come to study the artwork and the documents that we create in the making of Disney animated films. You know, there's over 60 million pieces of artwork here in this building, so there's always a possibility that something new and previously unknown might show up. Today I want to share with you what we think is an absolutely remarkable discovery. In the process of doing research for this diamond edition of Snow White, a really unique piece of Snow White history was uncovered. It was in this box that there was a folder that contained a small bunch of story sketches, the first of which said, Snow White Returns. Further investigation led to finding more story sketches, enough to see the arc of a storyline. Sequel to Snow White? Could it possibly be? A press release from the Disney studio prior to the completion of Snow White relates that the artists working on the film were so convinced of the appeal of their characters that they were begging Walt to put these newly created characters into upcoming productions. So what about these story sketches for Snow White Returns? When were they created? Why were they made? A very likely theory is that these story sketches for Snow White Returns were created after the movie was released, and that it was probably intended to be a short rather than a full-length animated feature. We do know that following the amazing success of Snow White, that there was a great demand from the viewing public for more cartoons with the dwarves. But we also know that two major sequences that were developed for Snow White were deleted from the final film. These two sequences happen to figure really prominently in the story outlined by these newly discovered images. The soup eating sequence was dropped from Snow White in November of 1937. Walt cut it, even though he loved it, because he felt like it just slowed down the story. The bed building sequence was the second deleted scene. This sequence is a series of gags as each of the dwarves and some of their animal helpers build parts of the bed in their own unique ways. Ward Kimball was the directing animator on both the bed building and the soup eating sequence. He often said that Walt Disney gave him the character of Jiminy Cricket in Pinocchio as a consolation for the months of work he put into these sequences that ended up on the cutting room floor. Perhaps Snow White Returns was considered as a way to make use of these near final but beautiful animations. Whatever its history, it's still fun for us today to reconstruct these storyboards for Snow White Returns to see what might have been. In the following presentation, we've included abbreviated versions of the scenes that exist in pencil animation, but you can also see these deleted scenes in their complete form by selecting them from the menu. Now here we go. Let's take a look. Following the title card, you see the seven dwarves marching off to work, singing a song, undoubtedly hi-ho, hi-ho.
Hi-ho, hi-ho,
then we cut to a long shot of the dwarfs marching off to work. A bird appears in the sky carrying something in its beak, and the bird swoops down over the dwarves and holds the piece of paper in his mouth right in front of Doc's face. And Doc takes the paper out and takes a while to kind of focus on it. And now that he's focused, we see what he sees. Dears, I'm coming tomorrow for my annual visit, Snow White. Doc tells the others that it's a letter from Snow White, and they're all overjoyed with the news. One of the dwarfs says, we'll have to give her a surprise. And the dwarfs all agree, yeah, a present, and they sing and dance around, a present, we're gonna give her a present. Well, one of the dwarfs asks, but what'll it be? And the other dwarfs echo, yeah, what'll it be, what'll it be?
Why don't we make her a bed?
That's it, a bed, a bed.
The dwarfs say, there it is, finished. All of a sudden, an enticing smell wafts through the air, and Dopey receives the smell in kind of Morse code. Led by their noses, the dwarfs follow the scent to the cottage, with Dopey taking up the rear as he always does. They look through the window and see Snow White, and she's cooking. And they race to the door, and they're like really thrilled, and they burst into the room. Snow White greets them all and gives Dopey a kiss on the forehead like she always does, and of course he blushes like he always does, and all the dwarfs laugh. The scent of cooking soup draws the dwarfs' attention, and they look back to Snow White for permission, and Snow White nods her head, and that's all the signal they need.
With the music in your soul, you can cheer things up with the zup of the music in your soul.
So, after all the excitement, Snow White says, well, don't you think that's about enough for tonight? And suddenly Doc remembers, but wait, we have a surprise. They tell Snow White to stay put, and they leave the cottage. One of the dwarfs pops his head back in and tells her not to peek, and she assures him she won't. She covers her eyes with her hands. Outside, 6 dwarfs position themselves to lift the bed. Grumpy just stands aside watching, and Doc says, all right, together now, men. Ready, set, go! They strain and strain, but the bed doesn't move. And Grumpy harumphs, well, a fine bunch of petunias you turned out to be. Your bed's still growing. They look up at one of the bedposts and see a fresh little sprout coming out of the top. It's only then that they realize that the tree trunk from which the bedpost is carved is still rooted in the ground. Yes, sir, we forgot to cut it loose. What do we do about it? Better start sawing, Grumpy says. Well, meanwhile, Snow White is waiting patiently in the cottage. Oh, and she yawns. I wonder where they could be, she says. Night's fallen. The dwarfs haul the bed to the front door of the cottage, and Doc admonishes them. Easy now, men. He opens the door, and they all rush in and yell, surprise! Their jaws drop as they survey the room, and it's empty. They tiptoe in, and to their great surprise, she's gone. Where is she? I don't know. They look around, even checking under the rug, and one dwarf, looking through the bedroom door, calls to the others, look! We cut to Snow White asleep across the dwarves' beds. The dwarf who looked through the door calls down to the others, she's asleep! The other dwarves come upstairs and see Snow White sleeping peacefully. They leave the room quietly, and Dopey closes the door behind them. But one of the dwarves